Section 1 of Messengers of Evil by Marcel, Allain and Pierre Souvestre. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Don W. Jenkins. Messengers of Evil by Marcel, Allain and Pierre Souvestre. Chapter 1. The Drama of the Rue Norvins. On Monday, April 4th, 19, the evening paper, La Capitale, published the following article on its first page. A drama, over the motives of which there is a bewildering host of conjectures, was unfolded this morning on the heights of Montmartre. The Baroness de Vibray, well known in the Parisian world and among artists, whose generous patroness she was, has been found dead in the studio of the ceramic painter, Jacques Dollon. The young painter, rendered completely helpless by a soporific, lay stretched out beside her when the crime was discovered. We say crime designedly, because, when the preliminary medical examination was completed, it was clear that the death of the Baroness de Vibray was due to the absorption of some poison. The painter, Jacques Dollon, whom the enlightened attentions of Dr. Myron had drawn from his condition of stupor, underwent a short examination from the superintendent of police, in the course of which he made remarks of so suspicious a nature that the examining magistrate put him under arrest then and there. At police headquarters they are absolutely dumb regarding this strange affair. Nevertheless, the personal investigation undertaken by us throws a little light on what is already called the drama of the Rue Norvins. The discovery of the crime. This morning, about 7 o'clock, Madame Bijou, a housekeeper in the service of the painter, Jacques Dollon, who, with his sister, Mademoiselle Elizabeth Dollon, occupied lodge number 6 in the close of the Rue Norvins, was on the ground floor of the house, attending to her customary duties. She had been on the premises about half an hour, and, so far, had not noticed anything abnormal. However, astonished at not hearing any movements on the floor above, for the painter generally rose pretty early, Madame Bijou decided to go upstairs and wake her master, who would be vexed at having let himself sleep so late. She had to pass through the studio to reach Monsieur Jacques Dollon's bedroom. No sooner had she raised the door curtain of the studio than she recoiled, horror-struck. Disorder reigned in the studio, a startling disorder. Pieces of furniture displaced, some of them overturned, showed that something extraordinary had happened there. In the middle of the room, on the floor, lay the inanimate form of a person whom Madame Bijou knew well, for she had seen her at the painter's house many a time, the Baroness de Vibray. Not far from her, buried in a large armchair, motionless, giving no sign of life, was Monsieur Jacques Dollon. When the good woman saw the rigid attitude of these two persons, she realized that she was in the presence of a tragedy. Stirred to the depths, she redescended the stairs, calling for help. Shortly afterwards, the entire close was in a state of ferment. House, porters, neighbours, male and female, crowded round Madame Bijou, endeavouring to understand her disconnected account of the terrifying spectacle she had come face to face with but a minute before. Sudden death, suicide, crime, all were plausible suppositions. The more audacious of these gossip mongers had ventured as far as the studio door. From that standpoint, a rapid glance round enabled them to get a clear idea of the truth of the housekeeper's statements. They returned to give a confirmation of them to the inquisitive and increasing crowd in the principal avenue of the Close. The police must be informed!" cried the Close portress. Whilst this woman, with considerable presence of mind, and aided by Madame Bijou, exerted herself to keep out the people of the neighbourhood who had got wind of the tragedy, two men had set off to seek the police. Lodge number 6. On the summit of Montmartre is the Rue Norvins. In shape it resembles a donkey's back, and at one particular spot it hugs the accentuated curve of the butte. The close of rue Norvins is situated at number 47. It is separated from the street by a strong iron gate, the porter's lodge being at the side. The close consists of a series of little dwellings, separated by wooden railings, up which climbing plants grow. Fine trees encircle these abodes with so thick a curtain of leafage that the inhabitants might think themselves buried in the depths of the country. Lodge number 6 is even more isolated than the others. It consists of a ground floor and a first floor, with an immense studio attached. 3 years ago, number 6 was leased to Monsieur Jacques Dollon, then a student at the Fine Arts School. It has been continuously occupied by the tenant and his sister, Miss Elizabeth Dollon, who has kept house for her brother. For the last fortnight the painter has been alone. His sister, who had gone to Switzerland to convalesce after a long illness, was expected back that same day, or the day following. The reputation of the two young people is considered by their neighbours to be beyond criticism. The artist has led a regular and hard-working life. Last year the Salon accorded him a medal of the second class. His sister, an affable and unassuming girl, seemed always much attached to her brother. In that very bohemian neighbourhood she is highly thought of as a girl of the most estimable character. The Baroness de Vibray visited them frequently, and her motor car used to attract attention in that high, remote suburb, the wilds of Montmartre. The old lady liked to dress in rather showy colours. She was considered eccentric, but was also known to be good and generous. She took a particular interest in the Dollons, whose family, so it was said, she had known in Provence. Jacques Dollon and his sister highly valued their intimacy with the Baroness de Vibray, who was known all over Paris as a patroness of artists and the arts. First verifications. Already slander and imagination between them had concocted the wildest stories when Monsieur Agram, the eminent police superintendent of the Clignancourt quarter, appeared at the entrance to the Close. Accompanied by his secretary, he at once entered number 6, charging the two policemen who were assisting him on no account to allow anyone to enter, excepting the doctor, whom he had at once sent for. He requested the portress to hold herself at his disposal in the garden, and made Madame Béju accompany him to the studio. Barely 20 minutes had elapsed since the housekeeper had been terror-struck by the dreadful spectacle which had met her eyes there. When she entered with the superintendent of police, nothing had been altered. Madame de Vibray, horribly pale, her eyes closed, her lips violet-hued, lay stretched upon the floor. Her body had assumed the rigidity of a corpse. That of Jacques Dollon, huddled in an armchair, was in a state of immobility. Monsieur Agram at once noticed long intersecting streaks on the floor, such as might have been traced by heavy furniture dragged over the waxed boards of the flooring. A pungent medicinal odour caught the throats of the visitors. Madame Béju was about to open a window. The superintendent stopped her. "Let things remain as they are for the present," was his order. After casting an observant eye round the room, he questioned the housekeeper. "Is this state of disorder usual?" "Never in this world, sir," declared the good woman. "Monsieur Dollon and his sister are very steady, very regular in their habits, especially the young lady. It is true she has been absent for nearly a month, but her brother has often been left alone, and he has always insisted on his studio being kept in good order." "Did Monsieur Dollon have many visitors?" "Very seldom, monsieur. Sometimes his neighbours would come in, and then there was that poor lady lying there so deathly pale that it makes me ill to look at her." "Jacques Dollon lives." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of the doctor employed in connection with relief for the poor. The superintendent of police pointed out to this Dr. Myron the two inanimate figures. A glance of the doctor's trained eye sufficed to show him that Madame de Vibray had been dead for some time. Approaching Jacques Dollon, Dr. Myron examined him attentively. "Will you help me to lift him on to a bed or a table?" he asked. "It seems to me that this one is not dead." "His bedroom is next to this," cried Madame Béju. "Oh, heavens above! If only the poor man would recover!" Silently the doctor, aided by the superintendent and a policeman, transported young Dollon into the next room.
"Air!" cried the doctor. "Give him air! Open all the windows! It seems to me a case of suspended animation. There is partial suffocation. This will probably yield to energetic treatment."
Whilst good Madame Béju, whose legs were shaking under her, was carrying out the doctor's orders, the superintendent of police kept watch to see that nothing was touched. The doctor's attention was concentrated on Jacques Dollon. Monsieur Agram was searching for some indication which might throw light on the drama. So far he had been unable to formulate any hypothesis. Should the moribund painter return to consciousness, the explanation he could give would certainly clear up the situation. At this point in the superintendent's cogitations, the doctor called out:
"He lives! He lives! Bring me a glass of water!"
Jacques Dollon was returning to consciousness, slowly, painfully, his features contracting as at the remembrance of a horrible nightmare. The young man stretched his limbs, opened his eyes. He turned a dull gaze on those about him, a gaze which became one of stupefaction when he perceived these unknown faces gathered round his bed. His eyes fell on his housekeeper. He murmured: Madame and fell back into unconsciousness. "Is he dead?" whispered Monsieur Agram. The doctor smiled.
"Be reassured, monsieur, he lives, but he finds it terribly difficult to wake up. He has certainly swallowed some powerful narcotic and is still under its influence, but its effects will soon pass off now." The good doctor spoke the truth. In a short time Jacques Dollon, making a violent effort, sat up. Casting scared and bewildered glances about him, he cried: "Who are you? What do you want of me? Oh, the ruffians! The bandits!" "There is nothing to fear, monsieur. I am simply the doctor they have called in to attend to you. Be calm. You must recover your senses and tell us what has happened."
Jacques Dollon pressed his hands to his forehead, as though in pain. "How heavy my head is!" he muttered. "What has happened to me? Let me see. Wait. Ah, yes, that's it." At a sign from the doctor, the superintendent had stationed himself beside the bed, behind the young painter. Keeping a finger on his patient's pulse, the doctor asked him, in a fatherly fashion, to tell him all about it. "It's like this," replied Jacques Dollon. "Yesterday evening I was sitting in my armchair reading. It was getting late. I had been working hard. I was tired. All of a sudden I was surrounded by masked men, clothed in long black garments. They flung themselves on me. Before I could make a movement I was gagged, bound with cords. I felt something pointed driven into my leg, into my arm. Then an overpowering drowsiness overcame me. The strangest visions passed before my eyes. I lost consciousness rapidly. I wanted to move, to cry out. In vain. There was no strength in me. Powerless, and that's all."
"There's nothing more?"
asked the doctor. After a moment's reflection, Jacques answered: "That is all." He now seemed fully awake. He moved. The movement was evidently painful. "It hurts," he said, instinctively putting his hand on his left thigh.
"Let us see what is wrong," said the doctor, and was preparing to examine the place when a voice from the studio called: "Monsieur!" It was Monsieur Agram's secretary. The magistrate left his post by the bed and went to the studio. "Monsieur," said the secretary, "I have just found this paper under the chair in which Monsieur Dollon was. Will you acquaint yourself with its contents?" The magistrate seized the paper. It was a letter couched in the following terms: "Dear Madame, if you do not fear to climb the heights of Montmartre some evening, will you come to see the painted pottery I am preparing for the Salon? You will be welcome, and will confer on us a great pleasure. I say us, because I have excellent news of Elizabeth, who is returning shortly. Perhaps she will be here to receive you with me. I am your respectful and devoted Jacques Dollon." The magistrate was frowning as he handed back the letter to his secretary, saying: "Keep it carefully." Then he went into the bedroom, where the doctor was talking to the invalid. The doctor turned to Monsieur Agram. "Monsieur Dollon has just asked me who you are. I did not think I ought to hide from him that you are a superintendent of the police, monsieur." "Ah!" cried Jacques Dollon. "Can you help me to discover what happened to me last night?" "You have just told us yourself, monsieur," replied the magistrate.
But have you nothing further to tell us? Can you not recollect whether or no you had a visitor before the arrival of the men who attacked you?"
"Why, no, monsieur, no one called."
The doctor here intervened.
"The pain in the leg monsieur complained of need not cause any anxiety. It is a very slight superficial wound. A slight swelling above the broken skin possibly indicates an intramuscular puncture which might have been made by someone unaccustomed to such operations, for it is a clumsy performance. It is a queer business."
Monsieur Agram, who had been steadily observing Jacques Dollon, persisted: "Is there not a gap, monsieur, in your recollections of what occurred? Were you quite alone yesterday evening? Were you not expecting anyone? Are you certain that you did not have a visitor? Did not someone pay you a visit, someone you had asked to come and see you?" Jacques Dollon opened his eyes of stupefaction, and stared at the superintendent.
"No, monsieur."
"It is that," went on Monsieur Agram. Then, stopping short and drawing the doctor aside, he asked: "Do you consider him in a fit state to bear a severe moral shock, a confrontation?" The doctor glanced at his patient.
"He appears to me to be quite himself again. You can act as you see fit, monsieur."
Jacques Dollon, astonished at this confabulation and vaguely uneasy, was, in fact, able to get up without help. "Be good enough to go into your studio, monsieur," said the magistrate. Jacques Dollon complied without a word. No sooner did he cross the threshold than he recoiled, terror struck. He was shaking from head to foot. His lips were quivering. Every feature expressed horrified shrinking from the spectacle confronting him.
The Baroness de Vibray!" he barely articulated. "How could it be possible?"
The superintendent of police did not lose a single movement made by the young painter, keeping a lynx-eyed watch on every expression that flitted across his countenance. He said: "It certainly is the Baroness de Vibray, dead, assassinated, no doubt. How do you explain that?"
"But," retorted Jacques Dollon, who appeared overwhelmed, "I do not know. I do not understand."
The magistrate replied: "Yet did you not invite her to your studio? Had you not asked her to come some evening soon? Had you not certain pieces of painted pottery to show her?"
"That is so," confessed the painter, "but I was not aware. I did not know."
He seemed about to faint. The doctor made him sit down on the chair where he had been found unconscious. Whilst he was recovering, Monsieur Agram continued his investigations. He opened a little cupboard in which were several poisonous powders. This was shown by the writing on the flasks containing them. He spoke to the doctor, taking care that Jacques Dollon did not overhear him. "Did you not say that this woman's death is due to poison?"
"It certainly looks like it. A post mortem will..."
The arrest. Interrupting the doctor, Monsieur Agram went up to Jacques Dollon. "In the exercise of your profession, monsieur, do you not make use of various poisons, of which you have a reserve supply here?"
"That is so," confirmed Jacques Dollon in a faint voice, "but it is a very long time since I employed any of them."
"Very good, monsieur." Monsieur Agram now made Madame Béju leave the room. He asked her to transmit an order to his policemen. They were to drive back the crowd. Soon a cab brought by a constable entered the Close, and drew up before the door of number 6. Jacques Dollon, supported by two people, descended and entered the cab. Immediately a rumour spread that he had been arrested. The rumour was correct. Our inquiry: silence at police headquarters: probable motives of the crime. Such are the details referring to this strange affair which we have been able to procure from those who were present. But the motives which determined the arrest of Monsieur Dollon are obscure. There are, however, two suspicious facts. The first is the puncture made in Monsieur Jacques Dollon's left leg. This puncture is aggravated by a scratch. According to the doctors, soporific, injected into the human body by the de Pravaz syringe, acts violently and efficaciously. It is beyond a doubt that Monsieur Jacques Dollon has been rendered unconscious in this manner. To begin with, the painter's first version was considered the true one, namely, that he had been surprised by robbers, who rendered him unconscious. But on reflection, this explanation would not hold water. Murderous house thieves do not send people to sleep. They kill them. Add to this that nothing has been stolen from Monsieur Dollon. Therefore, mere robbery was not the motive of the crime. Besides, Monsieur Dollon maintained that he was alone, yet at the time Madame de Vibray was in his studio, and was there precisely because the artist had asked her to come. We know that the Baroness de Vibray, who was very wealthy, took a particular interest in this young man and his sister. We should consider ourselves to blame did we not remind our readers that the names of these personages, Dollon, Vibray, implicated in the drama of the Rue Norvins, have already figured in the chronicles of crimes both recent and celebrated. Thus the assassination of the Marquise de Langrune cannot have been forgotten, an assassination which has remained a mystery, which was perpetrated a few years ago and brought into prominence the personalities of Monsieur Rambert and the charming Thérèse Auvernois. Madame de Vibray, who has just been so tragically done to death, was an intimate friend of the Marquise de Langrune. Monsieur Jacques Dollon is a son of Madame de Langrune's old steward. We do not, of course, pretend to connect, in any way whatever, the drama of the Rue Norvins with the bygone drama which ended in the execution of Gurn; but we cannot pass over in silence the strange coincidence that, within the space of a few years, the same halo of mystery surrounds the same group of individuals. Footnote 1. See Fantomas. But let us return to our narrative. Monsieur Jacques Dollon, interrogated by the superintendent of police, declared that he very rarely made use of the poisons locked up in the little cupboard of his studio. Notwithstanding this, it was discovered, during the course of the perquisition, that one of the phials containing poison had been recently opened, and that traces of the powder were still to be found on the floor. This powder is now being analysed, whilst the faculty are engaged in a post mortem examination of the unfortunate victim's body. But at the present moment everything leads to the belief that there does not exist an immediate and certain link between this poison and the sudden death of the Baroness de Vibray. It might easily be supposed, and this we believe is the view taken at police headquarters, that for a motive as yet unknown, a motive the judicial examination will certainly bring to light, the artist has poisoned his patroness, and, in order to put the authorities on the wrong scent, perhaps he hoped she would leave the studio before the death agony commenced, he has devised this species of tableau, invented the story of the masked men. In fact, the doctor who first attended him has declared that the puncture, clumsily made, might very well have been done by Jacques Dollon himself. It is worth noting that not a soul saw the Baroness de Vibray enter Monsieur Dollon's house yesterday evening. As a rule, she comes in her motor car, and all the neighbourhood can hear her arrival. It seems evident that Jacques Dollon will abandon the line of defence he has adopted. It can hardly be described as rational. There is little doubt but that we shall have sensational revelations regarding the crime of the Rue Norvins. Last hour. Mademoiselle Elizabeth Dollon, to whom police headquarters has telegraphed that a serious accident has happened to her brother, has sent a reply telegram from Lausanne to the effect that she will return tonight. The unfortunate girl is probably ignorant of all that has occurred. Nevertheless, we believe that 2 detectives have left at once for the frontier, where they will meet her, and shadow her as far as Paris, in case she should get news on the way of what had occurred, and should either attempt to escape, or make an attempt on her life. Decidedly, tomorrow promises to be a day full of vicissitudes. This article, published on the first page of La Capitale, was signed Jérôme Fandor. End of Chapter 1. Read by Don W. Jenkins, Rancho San Diego, California, shaggybark.blogspot.com. Of Messengers of Evil by Marcel, Allain, and Pierre Souvestre. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Don W. Jenkins. Chapter 2. Thomery's Two Loves. 2 days before the sinister drama, details of which Jérôme Fandor had given in La Capitale, the smart little town house inhabited by the Baroness de Vibray, in the Avenue Henri Martin, assumed a festive appearance. This did not surprise her neighbours, for they knew the owner of this charming residence was very much a woman of the world, whose reception rooms were constantly open to the many distinguished Parisians forming her circle of acquaintances. It was 7 in the evening when the Baroness, dressed for dinner, passed from her own room into the small drawing room adjoining. Crossing a carpet so thick and soft that it deadened the sound of footsteps, she pressed the button of an electric bell beside the fireplace. A major domo of the most correct appearance presented himself. "The Baroness rang for me?" Madame de Vibray, who had instinctively sought the flattering approval of her mirror, half turned.
"I wish to know if anyone called this afternoon, Antoine."
"For the Baroness?"
"Of course," she replied, a note of impatience in her voice. "I want to know if anyone called to see me this afternoon."
"No, madame."
"No one has telephoned from the Barbey Nanteuil bank?"
"No, madame." Repressing a slight feeling of annoyance, Madame de Vibray changed the subject.
"You will have dinner served as soon as the guests arrive. They will not be later than 7:30, I suppose."
Antoine bowed solemnly, vanished into the anteroom, and from thence gained the servants' hall. Madame de Vibray quitted the small drawing room. Traversing the great gallery with its glass roof, encircling the staircase, she entered the dining room. Covers were laid for 3. Inspecting the table arrangements with the eye of a mistress of the house, she straightened the line of some plates, gave a touch of distinction to the flowers scattered over the table in a conventional disorder. Then she went to the sideboard, where the major domo had left a china pot filled with flowers. With a slight shrug, the Baroness carried the pot to its usual place, a marble column at the further end of the room.
"It was fortunate I came to see how things were. Antoine is a good fellow, but a harebrained one too," thought she.
Madame de Vibray paused a moment. The light from an electric lamp shone on the vase and wonderfully enhanced its glittering beauty. It was a piece of faience decorated in the best taste. On its graceful form the artist had traced the lines of an old colour print, and had scrupulously preserved the picture born of an 18th century artist's imagination, with its brilliancy of tone and soft background of tender grey. Madame de Vibray could not tear herself away from the contemplation of it. Not only did the design and the treatment please her, but she also felt a kind of maternal affection for the artist.
"This dear Jacques," she murmured, "has decidedly a great deal of talent, and I like to think that in a short time his reputation..."
Her reflections were interrupted by the servant. The good Antoine announced in a low voice, and with a touch of respectful reproach in his tone: "Monsieur Thomery awaits the Baroness in the small drawing room. He has been waiting 10 minutes."
"Very well, I am coming."
Madame de Vibray, whose movements were all harmonious grace, returned by way of the gallery to greet her guest. She paused on the threshold of the small drawing room, smiling graciously. Framed in the dark drapery of the heavy door curtains, the soft light from globes of ground glass falling on her, the Baroness de Vibray appeared a very attractive woman still. Her figure had retained its youthful slenderness. Her neck, white as milk, was as round and fresh as a girl's; and had the hair about her forehead and temples not been turning grey, the Baroness wore it powdered, a piece of coquettish affection on her part, she would not have looked a day more than 30. Monsieur Thomery rose hastily, and advanced to meet her. He kissed her hand with a gallant air. "My dear Mathilde," he declared, with an admiring glance, "you are decidedly an exquisite woman." The Baroness replied by a glance, in which there was something ambiguous, something of ironical mockery.
"How are you, Norbert?" she asked in an affectionate tone. "And those pains?"
They seated themselves on a low couch, and began to discuss their respective aches and pains in a friendly fashion. Whilst listening to his complaints, Madame de Vibray could not but admire his remarkable vigour, his air of superb health. His looks gave the lie to his words. About 55, Monsieur Norbert Thomery seemed to be in the plenitude of his powers. His premature baldness was redeemed by the vivacity of his dark brown eyes, also by his long, thick moustache, probably dyed. He looked like an old soldier. He was the last of the great Thomery family, who, for many generations, had been sugar refiners. His was a personality well known in Parisian society, always first at his office or his factories. As soon as night fell, he became the man of the world, frequenting fashionable drawing rooms, theatrical first nights, official receptions, and balls in the aristocratic circles of the Faubourg Saint-Germain. Remarkably handsome, extremely rich, Thomery had had many love affairs. Gossips had it that between him and Madame de Vibray there had existed a tender intimacy, and, for once, gossip was right. But they had been tactful, had respected the conventions whilst their irregular union had lasted. Though now a thing of the past, for Thomery had sought other loves, his passion for the Baroness had changed to a calm, strong, semi-brotherly affection, whilst Madame de Vibray retained a more lively, a more tender feeling for the man whom she had known as the most gallant of lovers. Thomery suddenly ceased talking of his rheumatism. "But, my dear friend, I do not see that pretty smile which is your greatest charm. How is that?" Madame de Vibray looked sad. Her beautiful eyes gazed deep into those of Thomery.
"Ah," she murmured, "one cannot be eternally smiling. Life sometimes holds painful surprises in store for us."
"Is something worrying you?" Thomery's tone was one of anxious sympathy.
"Yes and no," was her evasive reply.
There was a silence. Then she said:
"It is always the same thing. I have no hesitation in telling you that, you, my old friend. It is a money wound. Happily, it is not mortal."
Thomery nodded. "Well, I declare it is just what I expected. My poor Mathilde, are you never going to be sensible?" The Baroness pouted.
"You know quite well I am sensible, only it happens that there are moments when one is short of cash. Yesterday I asked my bankers to send me 50,000 francs, and I have not heard a word from them."
"That is no great matter. The Barbey Nanteuil credit cannot be shaken."
"Oh," cried the Baroness, "I have no fears on that score. But as a rule, their delay in sending me what I ask for is of the briefest, yet no one has come from them to day."
Thomery began scolding her gently. "Ah, Mathilde, that you should be in such pressing need of so large a sum must mean that you have been drawn into some deplorable speculation. I will wager that you invested in those Oral copper mines after all."
"I thought the shares were going up," was Madame de Vibray's excuse.
She lowered her eyes like a naughty schoolgirl caught in the act. Thomery, who had risen, and was walking up and down the room, halted in front of her. "I do beg of you to consult those who know all the ins and outs, persons competent to advise you, when you are bent on plunging into speculations of this description. The Barbey Nanteuil people can give you reliable information. I myself, you know..."
"But since it is really of no importance,"
interrupted Madame de Vibray, who had no wish to listen to the remonstrances of her too prudent friend.
"What does it matter? It is my only diversion now. I love gambling. The emotions it arouses in one, the perpetual hopes and fears it excites."
Thomery was about to reply, to argue, to remonstrate further, but the Baroness had caught him glancing at the clock hanging beside the fireplace.
"I am making you dine late," she said in a tone of apology.
Then, with a touch of malice, and looking up at Thomery from under her eyes to see how he took it:
"You are to be rewarded for having to wait. I have invited Princess Sonia Danidoff to dine with you."
Thomery started. He frowned. He again seated himself beside the Baroness. "You have invited her?"
"Yes, and why not? I believe this pretty woman is one of your special friends, that you consider her the most charming of all your friends now."
Thomery did not take up the challenge. He simply said: "I had an idea that the Princess was not much to your taste." The eyes of Madame Vibray flashed a sad, strange look on her old friend, as she said gently:
"One can accustom oneself to anything and everything, my dear friend. Besides, I quite recognise that the Princess deserves the reputation she enjoys of being wonderfully beautiful and also intellectual."
Thomery did not reply to this. He looked puzzled, annoyed.
The Baroness continued:
They even say that handsome bachelor, Monsieur Thomery, is not indifferent to her fascinations; that for the first time in his life he is ready to link...
Oh, as for that, Thomery was protesting when the door opened and the Princess Sonia Danidoff rustled into the room, a superbly, a dazzlingly beautiful vision, all audacity and charm.
"Accept my apologies, dear Baroness," she cried, "for arriving so late, but the streets are crowded." "And I live such a long way out," added Madame de Vibray. "You live in a charming part," amended the Princess. Then, catching sight of Thomery: "Why, you!" she cried, and with a gracious and dignified gesture the Princess extended her hand, which the wealthy sugar refiner hastened to kiss. At this moment the double doors were flung wide, and Antoine, with his most solemn air, his most stiff starched manner, announced: "Dinner is served." "No," cried she, smiling, while she refused the arm offered by her old friend. "Take in the Princess, dear friend. I will follow by myself." Thomery obeyed. He passed slowly along the gallery into the dining room with the Princess. Behind them came the Baroness, who watched them as they went. Thomery, big, muscular, broad shouldered; Sonia Danidoff, slim, pliant, refined, dainty. Checking a deep sigh, the Baroness could not help thinking, and her heart ached at the thought: "What a fine couple they would make! What a fine couple they will make!" But as she seated herself opposite her guests, she said to herself: "Bah! I must send sad thoughts flying. It is high time. My dear Thomery," she cried playfully, I expect you to show yourself the most charming of men to your delicious neighbour." 10 o'clock had struck before Madame Vibray and her guests left the dinner table and proceeded to the small drawing room. Thomery was allowed to smoke in their presence. Besides, the Princess had accepted a Turkish cigarette, and the Baroness had allowed herself a liqueur. A most excellent dinner and choice wines had loosened tongues, and, in accordance with a prearranged plan, Madame de Vibray had directed the conversation imperceptibly into the channels she wished it to follow. Thus she learned what she had feared to know, namely, that a very serious flirtation had been going on for some time between Thomery and the Princess; that between this beautiful and wealthy young widow and the millionaire sugar refiner the flirtation was rapidly developing into something much warmer and more lasting. So far, the final stage had evidently not been reached. Nevertheless, Thomery had suggested tentatively that he would like to give a grand ball when he took possession of the new house which he was having built for himself in the Parc Monceau; and had he not been so extremely anxious to secure a partner for the cotillion which he meant to lead, then Madame Vibray had suggested that the person obviously fitted to play this important part was the Princess Sonia Danidoff. Who better? The suggestion was welcomed by both. It was settled there and then. "Yes," thought the Baroness, "Thomery's marriage is practically arranged, that is evident. Well, I must resign myself to the inevitable." It was about 11:30 when Sonia Danidoff rose to take leave of her hostess. Thomery, hesitating, looked first at his old friend, then at the Princess, asking himself what he ought to do. Madame de Vibray felt secretly grateful to him for this momentary hesitation. As a woman whose mourning for a dead love is over, she spoke out bravely. "Dear friend," said she, "surely you are not going to let the Princess return alone? I hope she will allow you to see her safely home." The Princess pressed the hands of her generous hostess. She was radiant. "What a good, kind friend you are!" she cried in an outburst of sincere affection. Then, with a questioning glance, in which there was a touch of uneasiness, a slight hesitation, she said: "Ah, do let me kiss you." For all reply, Madame Vibray opened her arms. The two women clung together, sealing with their kiss the treaty of peace both wished to keep. When the humming of the motor car, which bore off the Princess and Thomery, had died away in the distance, Madame de Vibray retired to her room. A tear rolled down her cheek. "A little bit of my heart has gone with them," she murmured. The poor woman sighed deeply. "Ah, it is my whole heart that has gone." There was a discreet knock at the door. She mastered her emotion. It was the dignified mistress of the house, who said quietly: "Come in." It was Antoine, who presented two letters on a silver platter.
He explained that, believing his mistress to be anxiously awaiting some news, he had ventured to bring up the last post at this late hour. After bidding Antoine good night, she recalled him to say: "Please tell the maid not to come up. I shall not require her. I can manage by myself." Madame de Vibray went toward the little writing table which stood in one corner of her room. In leisurely fashion she sat down, and proceeded to open her letters with a wearied air. "Why, it's from that nice Jacques Dollon!" she exclaimed, as she read the first letter she opened. "I was thinking of him at this very minute. Yes," she went on as she read, "I will certainly pay him a visit soon." Madame de Vibray put Jacques Dollon's letter in her handbag, recognizing on the back of the second letter the initials B.N., which she knew to be the discreet superscription on the business paper of her bankers, Messieurs Barbey Nanteuil. It was long and closely written, in a fine regular hand. When she began to read it, her attention was wandering, for her mind was full of Sonia Danidoff and Thomery, and what she had ascertained regarding their relation to each other. But little by little she became absorbed in what she was reading, till her whole attention was taken captive. As she read on, however, her eyes opened more and more widely. There was a look of keenest anguish in them, her features contracted as if in pain, her bosom heaved, her fingers were trembling under the stress of some intense emotion. "Oh, my God! Ah, my God!" she gasped out several times in a half-choked voice. Silence had reigned for a long while in the smart town house of the Baroness de Vibray in the avenue Henri Martin. From without came no sound. The avenue was quiet, deserted. The night was dark. But when 3 o'clock struck, the bedroom of Madame de Vibray was still flooded with light. She had not left her writing table since she had read the letter of her bankers, Messieurs Barbey Nanteuil. She wrote on, without intermission. End of Chapter 2. Read by Don W. Jenkins, Rancho San Diego, California, shaggybark.blogspot.com. Of Messengers of Evil by Marcel, Allain and Pierre Souvestre. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Don W. Jenkins. Chapter 3. Unexpected Complications. At 9 o'clock in the morning, the staff of that great evening paper, La Capitale, were assembled in the vast editorial room, writing out their copy, in the midst of a perfect hubbub of continual comings and goings, of regular shindies, of perpetual discussions. A stranger entering this room, which among its frequenters went by the name of the Wild Beasts' Cage, might easily have thought he was witnessing some 30 schoolboys at play in recreation time, instead of being in the presence of famous journalists celebrated for their reports and articles. Jérôme Fandor had no sooner appeared on the threshold than he was accorded a variety of greetings, ironical, cordial, fault-finding, sympathetic. But he ignored them all, for, like most of those who came into the editorial room at this hour, he was preoccupied with one thing only: where the caprice of his editorial secretary would send him flying for news, in the course of a few minutes. On what difficult and delicate task would he be dispatched? It depended on the exigencies of passing events, on how questions of the hour struck the editorial secretary, in relation to Fandor. Just as he had expected, the editorial secretary called him. "Hey, Fandor, come in here a minute." "I'm on the make-up. What have you got for today?" "I don't know. Who has charge of the landing of the King of Spain?" "Marais. He has just left. Have you seen the last issue of L'Avance?" "Here it is." The two men ran rapidly through the night's telegrams. "Deplorably empty," remarked the editorial secretary. "But where am I to send you? Ah, now I have it! That article of yours on the rue Norvins affair, yesterday evening, was interesting. It made the others squirm, I know. Isn't there anything more to be got out of that story?" "What do you want?" "Can't you stick in something just a little bit scandalous about the Baroness de Vibray, or about Dollon? About no matter whom, in fact. After all, it's our one and only crime to day, and you must put in something under that head." Jérôme Fandor seemed to hesitate. "Would you like me to rake up the past, refer to what happened before?"
What past?"
"Come now, you must have an inkling of what I refer to."
"Not I."
"Ah, my dear fellow, it will not be the first time we have had to mention these personages in our columns. Just cast your mind back to the Gurn affair."
"Ah, the drama in which a great lady was implicated, to her detriment. Lady Beltham."
"You have got it. These Dollons, Jacques and Elizabeth, did you know it, happened to be the children of old Dollon, who was murdered in the train, an extraordinary murder, when on his way to Paris to give evidence in the Gurn case."
"Why, of course, I remember perfectly," declared the editorial secretary. "Dollon, the father, was the Marquise de Langrune's steward. The old lady was murdered. Isn't that so?"
"That's it. But after the death of his mistress, he entered the service of the Baroness de Vibray, she who was assassinated yesterday."
"Well, I must say they have not been favoured by fortune," said the secretary jokingly. "But look here, Fandor, like father, like son, eh? If this young Dollon has murdered Madame de Vibray, doesn't that make you think that his father was the murderer of the Marquise de Langrune?"
Jérôme Fandor shook his head. "No, old boy, yesterday's crime was ordinary, even commonplace, but the assassination of the Marquise de Langrune, on the contrary, gave the police no end of bother."
"They did not find out anything, did they?"
"Why, yes. Don't you remember? Naturally enough, it must all seem rather remote to you, but I have all the details as clearly in mind as if they had happened only yesterday. The Gurn affair was one of the first I had a hand in with Juve. It was in connection with that very affair I made my start here on La Capitale."
[Footnote 2: See Fantomas.]
Fandor grew pale.
"And you were jolly proud of it, eh, Fandor? Good heavens, how you did hold forth about this Juve! And you regularly fed us up with this villain, so mysterious, so extraordinary, who was never run to earth, could not be captured, was capable of the most inhuman cruelties, capable of devising the most unimaginable tricks and stratagems, this Fantomas."
Fandor grew pale. "My dear fellow," said he, "never speak sneeringly or jokingly of Fantomas. No doubt it is taken for granted, by the public at any rate, that Fantomas is an invention of Juve and myself, that Fantomas never existed; and that, because this monster, who is a man of genius, has never been identified, because not a soul has been able to lay hands on him, and because, as you know, this fruitless pursuit has cost poor Juve his life."
"The truth is, this famous detective died a foul death."
"No, you are mistaken. Juve died on the field of honour, when, after a terribly difficult and dangerous investigation, he succeeded by this time it was no longer the Gurn Fantomas affair, but that of the Boulevard Inkermann at Neuilly in cornering Fantomas. He was well aware that he risked his life in entering the bandits' abode. What happened was that the villain found means to blow up the house and to bury Juve underneath the ruins. Fantomas has proved the stronger, but according to my ideas, Juve has had, none the less, the finest death he could desire: death in the midst of the fight, a useful death."
[Footnote 3: See The Exploits of Juve.] "Useful? In what way?"
"My dear fellow," cried Fandor in a tone of vigorous denial, "in the opinion of all unprejudiced minds, the death of Juve has proved up to the hilt the existence of Fantomas. More, it has forced this villain to disappear. It has restored peace, tranquillity to society. At the cost of his life, Juve has scored a final triumph. He has deprived Fantomas of the power to do harm, pared his claws, in fact."
"The truth is, he is never mentioned now by a soul, for all that, Fandor, only to see you smile. Why," and the editorial secretary shook a threatening finger at his colleague, "I'll wager you still believe in Fantomas! That one fine day you will write us a rattling good article announcing some fresh Fantomas crime."
Jérôme Fandor made no direct reply to this. It was useless to try and convince those who had not closely followed the records of crimes perpetrated during recent years. You could not make them believe in the existence of Fantomas. Fandor knew. But Juve dead, was there another soul who could know the true facts? All he said was: "Well, my dear fellow, this does not tell us what we are to fill up the paper with now. If the doings connected with Fantomas are frightful, rousing our feelings in the highest degree, I repeat that yesterday's crime bears no resemblance to them. We can put in a paragraph or so, that is all."
"No way, is there, of compromising anyone with our Baroness de Vibray?" "I don't think so. It's a perfectly commonplace affair. An elderly woman patronizes a young painter, whose mistress she may or may not be, and she ends up by getting herself assassinated when the young man imagines he is mentioned in her will." "Ah, good! Well, I think you will have to fall back on the opening of the Artesian well. That suit you?" "Oh, quite all right. If you like, I can give you my copy in half an hour. I know who are going to speak at the inauguration ceremony, and I can add names this evening. You know, I am a bit of a specialist as regards reports written beforehand." Fandor had got well on with his article. At the rate he was going, he would have finished that morning, he thought with pleasure, and would have a free afternoon. Just then an office boy appeared.
"Monsieur Fandor, you are being asked for at the telephone."
Like most journalists, Fandor was accustomed to reply in 9 cases out of 10, in similar cases, that he was not to be found. On this occasion, however, some interior prompting made him say: "I will come." A few minutes later, Fandor went up to the editorial secretary. "Look here, old fellow, something unexpected has happened. I must go to the Palais de Justice. You don't want me for anything else this morning, do you?" "No, go along. But what's up?" "Oh, this Jacques Dollon, you know, the assassin of the rue Norvins. Well, this imbecile has gone and hanged himself in his cell." At the exit door of La Capitale, in the noisy rue Montmartre, crowded with costermongers' barrows, Jérôme Fandor hailed a taxi. "To the Palais." Some minutes later, he was crossing the wall of the Wandering Footsteps, as it is called, giving rapid, cordial greetings to all the barristers of his acquaintance. One never knew when they might impart a special piece of information which let an enterprising journalist into the know, or put him early on to a good thing, and finally reach the lobbies of the law courts proper. He was saying to himself as he went along: "He is a good fellow, Jouet. The news is not known yet. He telephoned me first." His friend Jouet met him with a warm handshake. "You did not seem to be in a good temper at the telephone just now, although I was giving you a nice bit of information." "Yes," retorted Fandor, "but information which simply proved how much the administrators of justice, to which you have the misfortune to belong, can make egregious mistakes. When for once you succeed in immediately arresting the assassin of someone well known, and are in a position to bring into play all the power and rigour of the law, you are clumsy enough to give the fellow a chance of punishing himself. You let him commit suicide on the very first night of his arrest." Fandor had been speaking in a fairly loud voice, as usual, but, at imperative signs made by his friend, he lowered his tones. "What is it?" he murmured. His friend rose. "What we are going to do, old boy, is to take a turn in the galleries. I have something to say to you, and, joking apart, you are not to breathe a word of it to a soul. Shh!" "Count on me." Presently the two friends found themselves in one of the corridors of the Palais, known only to barristers and those accused of law breaking. "Come now!" cried Fandor. "Your assassin has hanged himself, hasn't he?" "My assassin?" expostulated the junior barrister. "My assassin? Allow me to inform you that Jacques Dollon is innocent." "Innocent?" Jérôme Fandor shrugged a disbelieving shoulder. "Innocent? It is the fashion of the day to transform all murderers into innocents. What ground have you for making such a declaration of innocence?" "Here is my ground. I have just copied it out for you. Read." Fandor hastened to read the paper handed to him by his friend. It was headed thus: "Copy of a letter brought by Maître Gérin to the Public Prosecutor. A letter addressed to Maître Gérin by the Baroness de Vibray." "Oh, it's a plant!" cried Fandor. "Go on reading. You will see." Fandor continued: "My dear Maître, you will forgive me, I am certain of that, for all the inconvenience I am going to cause you. I turn to you because you are the only friend in whom I have confidence. I have just received a letter from my bankers, Messieurs Barbey, Nanteuil, of whom I have often spoke to you, who you know manage all my money affairs for me. This letter informs me that I am ruined. You quite understand, absolutely, completely ruined. The house I am living in, my carriage, the luxurious surroundings so necessary to me, I shall have to give it all up, so they tell me. These people have dealt me a terrible blow, struck me brutally. My dear Maître, I learned this only 2 hours ago, and I am still stunned by it. I do not wish to wait for the inevitable moment when I shall begin to console myself, because I shall begin to hope that the disaster is exaggerated.
I have no family. I am already old. Apart from the satisfaction it gives me to use my influence on behalf of youthful talent, and to help forward its development, my life has no sense in it. It is without aim or object. My dear maître, there are not two ways of announcing to one's friends resolutions analogous to that I now take. When you receive this letter, I shall be dead. I have in front of me, on my writing table, a tiny phial of poison, which I am going to drink to the last drop without any weakening of will, almost without fear, as soon as I have posted this letter to you myself. I must confess that I have an instinctive horror of being dragged to the morgue, as happens whenever there is some doubt about a suicide. It is on account of this I now write to you, so that, thanks to your intervention, all the mistakes justice is liable to make may be avoided. I kill myself, I only, that is certain. No one must be incriminated in connection with my death, if it be not fatality which has caused my ruin. I once more apologize, my dear maître, for all the measures you will be forced to take owing to my death, and I beg you to believe that my friendship for you was very sincere. Signed, Baroness de Vibray. "Good for you!" cried Fandor. "Here's a go! What a pretty petard in prospect! Jacques Dollon was innocent. You arrest him. He is so terrified that he hangs himself. Well, old boy, I must say you make some fine blunders on Clock Quay." "It is nobody's fault," protested the young barrister. "That is to say," retorted Fandor, "it is everybody's fault. By Jove, if you let innocent prisoners hang themselves in their cells, I am no longer surprised that you leave the guilty at liberty to walk the streets at their sweet will." "Don't make a joke of it, old boy. You understand, of course, that so far no one in the Palais has seen the letter. It has just been brought to the public prosecutor's office by Madame de Vibray's solicitor, Maître Gérin. You came on the scene only a few minutes after I had sent up the original to the examining magistrate. The case is in Fuselier's hands." "Is he in his office?" "Certainly. Certainly. He should proceed with the examination relative to poor Dollon this morning." "Very well, then, I will go up. I shall jolly soon get out of this booby of a Fuselier the information I need to make one of the best reports I have ever written. And you know, I am ever so obliged to you for the matter you've given me. But mind you, I am going to put together a bit of copy that will not deal tenderly with our gentlemen of the robe, the lot of you. No, it is a bad, unlucky business enough, but it is even more funny. It is tragicomedy." "For my part," began Fandor's barrister friend. "Yes, yes, good day, Pontius Pilate!" cried Fandor. "I am going up to Fuselier. We must meet to-morrow." Hastening along the corridors, Fandor gained the office of the examining magistrate. Fandor had known the magistrate a long while. Was not Fuselier the justice who, with detective Juve, had had everything to do with the strangely mysterious cases associated with the name of Fantomas? In the course of his various judicial examinations, he had often been able to give Fandor information and help. At first hostile to the constant preoccupation of Juve and Fandor, for long the arrest of Fantomas was their one aim, the young magistrate had gradually come to believe in what had seemed to him nothing but the detective's hypothesis. Open-minded, gifted with an alert intelligence, Fuselier had carefully followed the investigations of Juve and Fandor. He knew every detail, every vicissitude connected with the tracking of this elusive bandit. Since then, the magistrate had taken the deepest interest in the pursuit of the criminal. Thanks to his support, Juve had been enabled to take various measures, otherwise almost impossible, avoid the many obstacles offered by legal procedure, risk the striking of many a blow he could not otherwise have ventured on. Fuselier had a high opinion of Juve, and his attitude to Fandor was sympathetic. Our journalist was going over the past as he hastened along. Ah, if only Juve were here! If only this loyal servant of justice, this sincerest of friends, this bravest of the brave had not been struck down, Fandor would have been full of enthusiasm for the Dollon affair, for its interest was increasing, its mystery deepening. But Fandor was single-handed now. He had had a miraculous escape from the bomb which had blown up Lady Beltham's house on that tragic day when Juve had all but laid hands on Fantomas. But Fandor would not allow himself to become disheartened. Never that. In the school of his vanished friend, he had learned to give himself up with single-minded devotion to any task he took up, his sole satisfaction being duty well fulfilled. Well, the Dollon case should be cleared up.
To do so was to render a service to humanity. Having come to this conclusion, he hastened to interview Monsieur Fuselier. "Monsieur Fuselier," cried Fandor, as he shook hands with the magistrate, "you must know quite well why I have come to see you." "About the rue Norvins affair?" "Say rather about the Dépôt affair. It is there the affair became tragic." Monsieur Fuselier smiled. "You know, then?" "That Jacques Dollon has hanged himself? Yes. That he was innocent? Again, yes," confessed Fandor, smiling in his turn. "You know that at La Capitale we get all the information going, and are the first to get it." "Evidently," conceded the magistrate. "But if you know all about it, why put my professional discretion to the torture by asking absurd questions?" "Now what the deuce are they on about en Clock Quay? Don't they supervise the accused in their cells?" "Certainly they do. When this Dollon arrived at the Dépôt, he was immediately conducted to Monsieur Bertillon. There he was measured and tested, finger marks taken, and so on." "Just so," said Fandor. "I saw Bertillon before coming on to you. He told me Dollon seemed crushed. He submitted to all the tests without making the slightest objection, but he never spoke of suicide, never said anything which could lead one to imagine such a fatal termination." "Well, he would not cry it aloud on the housetops. When he left Monsieur Bertillon, what then?" "After? Oh, the police took him to a cell and left him there. At midnight the chief warder made his rounds and saw nothing abnormal. It was in the morning they found this unfortunate Dollon had hanged himself." "What did he hang himself with?" "With strips of his shirt twisted into a rope. Oh, my dear fellow, I see what you are thinking. You fancy that there has been a want of common prudence, that the warders were lax, that they had let him retain his braces, his cravat, or his shoelaces. Well, it was not so. Precautions were taken." "And this suicide remains incomprehensible?" "Well, this wretched youth must have been ferociously energetic, because he had fastened these shirt ropes of his to the iron bars of his bed, and strangled himself by lying on his back. Death must have been long in coming to release him from his agony." "Can I not see him?" asked Fandor. "Why not photograph him?" asked the magistrate in a bantering tone. "Oh, if it were possible!" Fandor stopped short. A youth knocked and entered. "A lady wishes to see you, monsieur." "Tell her I am too busy." "She asked me to say that it is urgent." "Ask her name." "Here is her card, monsieur." Monsieur Fuselier looked at the card. He started. "Elizabeth Dollon! Ah, good news! What am I to say to this poor girl? How am I to tell her?" Just then the door was pushed violently open, and a girl, in tears, rushed towards him. "Monsieur, where is my brother?" "But, mademoiselle!" Whilst the magistrate mechanically asked his distracted visitor to sit down, Jérôme Fandor discreetly withdrew to the further side of the room. He was anxious that the magistrate should forget his presence, so that he might be a witness of what promised to be a most exciting interview. "Pray control yourself, mademoiselle," begged the magistrate. "Your brother has perhaps been arrested through a mistake." "Oh, monsieur, I am sure of it, but it is frightful!" "Mademoiselle, the dreadful thing would be that he was guilty." "But they have not set him at liberty yet? He has not been able to clear himself?" "Yes, yes, mademoiselle, he has vindicated himself. I even..." Monsieur Fuselier stopped short, intensely pained, not knowing how to tell Elizabeth Dollon the terrible news. At once she cried: "Ah, monsieur, you hesitate! You have learned something fresh! You are on the track of assassins!" "It is certain your brother is not guilty." The poor girl's countenance suddenly brightened. She had passed a horrible night after her return to Paris and the receipt of the wire from police headquarters. "What a nightmare!" she cried. "But the telegram said he was injured. Nothing serious, is it? Where is he now? Can I see him?" "Mademoiselle," said the magistrate, "your brother has had a terrible shock. It would be better, I fear that..." Suddenly Elizabeth Dollon cried: "Oh, monsieur, how you said that! How can seeing me do him harm?" As Monsieur Fuselier did not reply, she burst into tears. "You are hiding something from me! The papers said this morning that he also was a victim. Swear to me that he is not!" "But..." "You are hiding something from me!" The poor girl was frantic with terror. She wrung her hands in a state of despair. "Where is he? I must see him! Oh, take pity on me!" As she watched the magistrate's downcast look, his air of discomfiture, the horrid truth flashed on Elizabeth Dollon. "Dead!" she cried. She was shaken with sobs. "Mademoiselle! Oh, mademoiselle!" implored the magistrate, filled with pity. He tried to find some words of consolation, and this confirmed her worst fears. "I swear to you, it is certain your brother was not guilty." The distracted girl was beyond listening to the magistrate's words. Huddled up in an arm chair, she lay inert, collapsed. Presently she rose like a person moving in some mad dream, her eyes wild.
"Take me to him! I want to see him! They have killed him for me! I must see him!"
Such was her insistence, the violence with which she claimed the right to go to her brother, to kneel beside him, that Monsieur Fuselier dared not refuse her this consolation. "Control yourself, I beg of you. I am going to take you to him. But, for heaven's sake, be reasonable. Control yourself." With his eyes he sought for the moral support of Fandor, whose presence he suddenly remembered. But our journalist, taking advantage of the momentary confusion, had quietly slipped from the room. Evidently some unpleasant occurrence had upset the routine existence of the functionaries at the Dépôt. The warders were coming and going, talking among themselves, leaning against the doors of the numerous cells. The chief warder called one of his men. "There must be no more of this disorder, Nibet." The chief warder was furious. He was about to hold forth to this subordinate when an inspector approached. "What is it?" he asked. "Sergeant, it is Monsieur Jouet. He has a gentleman with him. He has a permit. Shall I allow him to enter?"
"Who? Monsieur Jouet?"
"No, the gentleman accompanying him."
"Hang it all! Why, yes, if he has a permit."
The sergeant moved away, shrugging his shoulders disgustedly.
"Not pleased with things this morning, the chief isn't," one of the warders marked.
"Not likely, after last night's performance."
"It is he who will catch it hot over this business."
The warder rubbed his hands, laughing.
Meanwhile, Fandor had appeared at the entrance of the corridor, under the guidance of a warder. He was thinking of the splendid copy he had secured. He was hoping that when Fuselier learned that a journalist had obtained admittance to the Dépôt, and had seen the corpse of Jacques Dollon in his cell, that he would not turn vicious.
"But after all," he said to himself, "Fuselier is not the man to give me the go by out of spite."
Fandor walked up and down the hall of the prison. He had informed the warders that he was waiting for the magistrate.
"How strange life is," thought he. "To think that once again I should be brought into close contact with Elizabeth Dollon, and that there is no likelihood of her recognising me. We were such children when we parted, she especially. Had she any recollection of the little rascal I was at the time of poor Madame de Langrune's assassination?" And closing his eyes, Fandor tried to call to mind the features of the Jacques Dollon he used to know. It was useless. The body of Jacques Dollon he would be gazing at in a few minutes would be that of an unknown person, whose name alone awakened memories of bygone days. So, to pass the time, Fandor continued his marching up and down. Monsieur Fuselier appeared at the entrance to the Dépôt, supporting the unsteady steps of poor Elizabeth Dollon. Fandor quickly drew back into an obscure corner. "Better not attract any attention to myself just at present," thought Fandor. "I will wait until the cell door is opened. If Fuselier does not wish to give me permission to remain, I can at any rate cast a rapid glance round that ill-omened little cell." Fandor followed at a distance the wavering steps of the poor girl whom Monsieur Fuselier was supporting with fatherly care. When they paused before one of the cells pointed out by the head warder, Monsieur Fuselier turned to Elizabeth Dollon. "Do you think you are strong enough to bear this trial, mademoiselle? You are determined to see your brother?" Elizabeth bent her head. The magistrate turned toward the warder. "Open," said he. As the key was turned in the lock, he said: "According to instructions from the head, we have placed him on his bed again. There is nothing to frighten you. He seems to be asleep. Now then." But as he opened the door, stretching his arm in the direction of the bed where the body of Jacques Dollon should be, an oath escaped him. "Great heavens! The dead man is gone!" In his cell, with its bare walls, its sole furniture an iron bedstead and a stool riveted to the floor, in this little cell, which the eye could glance round in a second, there was no vestige of a corpse. Jacques Dollon's body was not there. "You have mistaken the cell," said the magistrate sharply. "No, no!" cried the astounded warder. "You can see, can't you, that Jacques Dollon is not there?" "He was there a few minutes ago." "Then he must have taken him somewhere else." "The keys have never left me." "Oh, come now!" "No, sir, he was there. Now he isn't there. That's all I know. Hey, you down there!" yelled the warder. "Who knows what has become of the corpse of cell 12? The corpse we laid out just now?"
One after the other, the warders came running. All confirmed what their chief had said: the dead body of Jacques Dollon had been left there, lying on the bed. Not a soul had entered the cell, not a soul had touched the corpse. Yet it was no longer there. Jérôme Fandor, well in the background, followed the scene with an ironical smile. The frantic warders, the growing stupefaction of Monsieur Fuselier, amused him prodigiously. The magistrate was trying to understand the how, the why, and wherefore of this incredible disappearance. "As this man is not here, he cannot have been dead. He has escaped. But if he wanted to escape, he must have been guilty. Oh, I cannot make head or tail of it!" Seizing the head warder by the shoulders, almost roughly, Monsieur Fuselier asked: "Look here, chief, was this man dead, or was he not?" Elizabeth Dollon was repeating: "He lives! He lives!" and laughing wildly. The warder raised his hand as though taking a solemn oath. "As to being dead, he was dead right enough. The doctor will tell you so too, also my colleague Favril, who helped me lay out the body on the bed." "But how can a dead body get away from here? If he was dead, he could not have escaped," said the magistrate. "It is witchcraft," declared the warder, with a shrug. Fuselier flew into a rage. "Had you not better confess that you and your colleagues did not keep proper watch and ward? The investigation will show on whose shoulders the responsibility rests." "But sakes alive, monsieur," expostulated the warder, "there aren't only two of us who have seen him dead. There are all the hospital attendants of the Dépôt as well. There is the doctor, and there are my colleagues to be counted on. The truth is, monsieur, some 50 persons have seen him dead." "So you say," cried the impatient magistrate, "I am going to inform the public prosecutor of what has happened, and at once." As he was hurrying away, he espied Jérôme Fandor, who had not missed a single detail of the scene. "You again!" exclaimed the irate magistrate. "How did you get in here?" "By permit," replied our journalist. "Well, you have learned what there is to know, haven't you? Be off, then. You are one too many here. Frankly, there is no need for you to augment the scandal. Will you, therefore, be kind enough to take yourself off?" And Fuselier, almost beside himself with rage, raced off to the public prosecutor's office. After the magistrate's furious attack, Fandor could not possibly linger in the corridors of the Dépôt. The warders, too, were pressing their attentions on him and on Elizabeth Dollon. "This way, monsieur! Madame, this way! Ah, it's a wretched business! Here, this way! This way! Be off as fast as you can!" Presently Fandor was descending the grand staircase of the Palais, steadying the uncertain steps of poor Elizabeth Dollon. "I implore you to help me!" she cried. "Help me! Help us! My brother is guiltless, I could swear to that! He must be found! This hideous nightmare must end!" "Mademoiselle, I ask nothing better, only where to find him?"
"Ah, I have no idea, none. I implore you, you who must know influential people in high places, do not leave any stone unturned. Do all that is humanly possible to save him, to save us!"
Intensely moved by the poor girl's anguish of mind, Fandor could not trust himself to speak. He bent his head in the affirmative merely. Hailing a cab, he put her into it, gave the address to the driver, and as he was closing the door, Elizabeth cried: "Do all that is humanly possible! Do everything in the world!" "I swear to you, I will get at the truth," was Fandor's parting promise. The cab had disappeared, but our journalist stood motionless, absorbed in his reflections. At last, uttering his thoughts aloud, he said: "If the Baroness de Vibray has written that she has killed herself, then she has killed herself, and Dollon is innocent. It's true the letter may be fictitious, therefore we must put it aside. We have no guarantee as to its genuineness. Here is the problem: Jacques Dollon is dead, and yet has left the Dépôt. Yes, but how?" Jérôme Fandor went off in the direction of the offices of La Capitale, so absorbed in thought that he jostled the passers by, without noticing the angry glances bestowed on him. "Jacques Dollon dead, has left the Dépôt." He repeated this improbable statement, so absurd, of necessity incorrect, repeated it to the point of satiety. "Jacques Dollon is dead, and he has got away from the Dépôt." Then, in an illuminating flash, he perceived the solution of this apparently insoluble problem. "A mystery such as this is incomprehensible, inexplicable, impossible, except in connection with one man. There is only one individual in the world capable of making a dead man seem to be alive after his death, and this individual is Fantomas." To formulate this conclusion was to give himself a thrilling shock. Since the disappearance of Juve he had never had occasion to suspect the presence, the intervention of Fantomas in connection with any of the crimes he had investigated as reporter and student of human nature. Fantomas! The sound of that name evoked the worst horrors. Fantomas! This bandit, this criminal, who has not shrunk from any cruelty, any horror. Fantomas is crime personified. Fantomas, he sticks at nothing. Pronouncing these syllables of evil omen, Fandor lived over again all the extraordinary, improbable, impossible things that had really happened, and had put him on the watch for this terrifying assassin. Fantomas! It was certain that to whatever degree he had participated in the assassination of the Baroness de Vibray, one must not be astonished at anything, neither at anything inconceivable, nor at any mysterious details connected with the murder. Fantomas! He was the daring criminal, daring beyond all bounds of credibility; and whatever might be the dexterity, the ingenuity, the ability, the devotion of those who were pursuing him, such were his tricks, such his craft and cunning, such the fertility of his invention, so well conceived his devices, so great his audacity, that there were grounds for fearing he would never be brought to justice and punished for his abominable crimes. Fantomas! Ah, if life ever brought Jérôme Fandor and this bandit face to face, there would ensue a struggle of every hour, day and moment, a struggle of the most terrible nature, a struggle in which man was pitted against man, a struggle without pity, without mercy, a fight to the death. Fantomas would assuredly defend himself with all the immense elusive powers at his command. Jérôme Fandor would pursue him with heart and soul, with his very life itself. It was not only to satisfy his sense of duty at the promptings of honour that the journalist would take action. He would have as a guide for his acts, and to animate his will, the passion of hate, and the hope of avenging his friend Juve, fallen a victim to the mysterious blows of Fantomas. In his article for La Capitale, Fandor did not directly mention the possible participation of Fantomas in the crime of the rue Norvins. When it was finished, he returned to his modest little flat on the 5th floor in the rue Bergère. He was about to enter the vestibule when he noticed a piece of paper, which must have been slipped under his door. He stooped and picked up an envelope. "Why, it is a letter, and there is no name and no stamp on it." Entering his study, he seated himself at his table and prepared to begin work. Then he bethought him of the letter, which he had carelessly thrown on the mantelpiece. He tore it open and drew out a sheet of letter paper. "Whatever is this?" he cried. His astonishment was natural enough, for the message was oddly put together. To prevent his handwriting being recognised, Fandor's correspondent had cut letters out of a newspaper, and had stuck them together in the desired order. The 2 or 3 lines of printed matter were as follows: "Jérôme Fandor, pay attention, great attention! The affair on which you are concentrating all your powers is worthy of all possible interest, but may have terribly dangerous consequences." Of course there was no signature. Evidently the warning referred to the Dollon case. "Why," exclaimed Fandor, "this is simply an invitation not to busy myself hunting for the guilty persons. Who has sent this invitation and warning? Surely the sender is the assassin, to whose interest it is that the inquiry into the rue Norvins murder should be dropped. It must be Jacques Dollon. But how could Dollon know my address? How could he have found time between his flight from the dépôt and the present minute to put this message of printed letters together and take it to the rue Bergère? And that at the risk of encountering someone who could recognise him and might have him arrested afresh? Had he accomplices?" Fandor was puzzled, agitated. "But I am mad, mad! It cannot be Dollon! Dollon is dead, dead as a doornail, dead beyond dispute, because 50 men have seen him dead, dead because the Dépôt doctors have certified his death." Daylight was fading, evening was coming on. Fandor was still turning the whole affair over in his mind. Every now and again he murmured: "Fantomas! Fantomas has to do with this extraordinary, this mysterious affair. Fantomas is in it. Fantomas!" End of Chapter 3. Read by Don W. Jenkins. Rancho San Diego, California, shaggybark.blogspot.com.